BoyleSports. Don't just bet. Choose wisely.
Hello and welcome back to On The Wire, brought to you by our sponsors, BoyleSports. Another fantastic episode in store as we have some Cheltenham clues. Looking back at the Dublin Racing Festival and looking forward to what is a great week in March in only a month's time. But before we introduce you to the fantastic panel today, I'd like to remind you again of some of the great offers that BoyleSports, our partners, provide. One being that you can bet €10 to get €70 worth of free bet credits. Make sure to scan the QR code on screen at the moment or go down into the description down below. On the lead up to Cheltenham next month, BoyleSports has some fantastic offers. Make sure to go down into the description down below to click onto the BoyleSports website and you can see the Cheltenham Bank Builder, where you can avail of plenty of free bets on the lead up to the Cheltenham Festival. Delighted to be joined by Dan Overall, Donn McClean and Gavin Lynch on the panel this afternoon. Going to be a fantastic look back at the Dublin Racing Festival, which was 2 days of super action and hopefully clues that we can bring forward into Cheltenham next month. I suppose in the interim since then, though, it would be remiss of us not to mention the ongoing situation with Michael O'Sullivan, who took a very bad fall midweek and is still down in Cork University Hospital. We're all wishing Michael is best. He's a fantastic young jockey, a fantastic young man as well. He's currently fighting for his life, so it would be incredibly remiss of us not to be wishing extremely the best to him. I know, Donn, you were down at the races when it happened. You were just mentioning there off air that it was a bit of a surreal feeling about it, and I'm sure not one that anyone wants to be part of.
No, I know it's horrendous, Andrew. Look, he's getting and got from the very beginning the best medical attention that he could have gotten, that he could be getting. So, as you say, please God, just thoughts and prayers are with him, and please God, everything will be okay.
Yeah, and Gavin, I suppose we're looking back at a fantastic weekend of action, but it quickly puts into perspective quite a lot of things, with us punters, for instance, trying to win a bit of money and all of that. When you see what these men and women are putting on the line day in, day out, it really does kind of make some of the things pretty trivial in the end.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, jockeys, national hunt jockeys in particular, they're among the bravest and maddest people in the world to do what they're doing. As Ted Walsh once said, that they're followed around by 2 ambulances. So, if a jockey gives a poor ride, sometimes we're a bit too quick to jump to complain about the jockey. But when you think about it, it's a long, long time since Kieran Kelly passed away in Kilbeggan, etc. So thankfully these things happen very, very rarely. But we wish Mikey all the best. I can think of nothing else since last Thursday, to be honest.
Yeah, very difficult, but we'll try to look back at the Dublin Racing Festival as we are looking forward to Cheltenham and looking like I thought it was 2 days of absolutely fantastic action. And we'll start off with the Nathaniel Lacy Novices Hurdle. And when we were previewing the show, Dan, Final Demand was the horse that potentially had the class, potentially had the upside about him, but he lacked the experience. But he didn't shape as a horse that did lack experience during the race.
And that was just his second start on the rules. Thoroughly professional, powered away really strongly. And perhaps one of the comments that really still tickled me was William Mullins afterwards, when he was kind of being mused about targets for his novices. I think the Albert Bartlett was presented as an almost likely option, given the way he hit the line over 2 miles 6 there. Willie almost looked bemused by the idea, like never even fathomed or considered it. I mean, he has literally been entered for the race. So at some stage, it physically was considered as an option. But seemingly they're going to the turners with him now. I mean, it was a thoroughly impressive performance. I'd say he'd probably have a stronger chance, in my view, in the Bartlett, given the weakness of that division relative to the likes of the New Lion, potentially in the turners. But either way, this is a horse of serious potential. And even if the turners maybe is a bit too sharp for him come the festival, which I'm not sure if that's necessarily going to be the case, he's a seriously exciting horse for the future.
Yeah, Gavin, putting it into perspective, I suppose, just playing devil's advocate, he's beaten wingmen around the exact same length that the Yellow Clay beat wingmen in the Lollers and Ace. We have both of them kind of flopping at the top of markets for both the 2.5 mile and the 3 mile race. How would you put it into perspective, I suppose, in the grand scheme of things, looking at Cheltenham?
Personally, I'd love him. I think he's an exceptional horse. To do that on his second start, yes, he beats Wingman by 12. The Yellow Clay beat him by 11, or vice versa in Naas, but that was his fourth start. So to do this in his second hurdle start was amazing. The form of the Limerick run has worked out fine. He just had a bit of a wow about him. A touch of the Denman's big, powerful 3 miler in time. His jumping was fine. I've watched the race a couple of times. He settled reasonably well, switched to the outside. He won very well. This was 2.6. You have to remember that the Turners is 2.5. It's only a furlong less. I'd love him. I think that the New Lines form from the Challow has taken a couple of knocks when you look at Bill Joyce and Regent Stroll getting bets in. So I think Cowabunga could be a danger. There's always going to be dangers, including the Yellow Clay, etc. But I would absolutely a Dove Final Demand. And I could see him being a reasonably warm order for the Brown Advisory next year.
Yeah, seems to be going down that route. Donn, I know you were quite sweet on Mozzie's sister, who ran a nice race back in third. Do you see anything maybe further down the field that we should be keeping an eye on, whether that be for festival handicaps or maybe going up in trip?
Yeah, it was an interesting race, Andrew. Like, I suppose the Nathaniel Lacy, it is normally a race that preempts the Albert Bartlett more so than the Turners, even though, as Gavin says, there's not that much of a difference between the shorter race and this in terms of distance. Dancing City finished third in the Albert Bartlett after winning this race last year for Willie Manella Cooner. The other one finished second in the Albert Bartlett. Gaillard de Menil, when he ran in the Turners, Statler, who finished third in the Nathaniel Lacy, he ran in the Albert Bartlett instead. So it's as you say afterwards, Willie did say it's the Turners. Interestingly, his final 4 furlongs was about 3 seconds quicker than the next best. So he showed pace relative to his rivals in the race and quickened up well. Wingman ran a big race. He'll be a player in Albert Bartlett, I'm sure. Mozzie's sister ran really well as well, just held on for third place from Jasmine DeVoe. And he was actually the horse that I took out of the race, Jasmine DeVoe. He's a wee bit of a forgotten horse. Like, he was sent off as favourite for the Lawlers of Naas race, the Grade 1 race that the Yellow Clay won. And look, his jumping wasn't good on his hurdling bow, but he's still had enough in hand to beat a good horse in the Enabler. Then he went to the Lawlers race. He didn't jump well there at all, and he just couldn't do that in a Grade 1 race. But in Cheek Pieces for the first time on Saturday, his jumping was way better. He just seemed to get a wee bit of pace at the second last before staying on again. And there's plenty of stamina in his pedigree. So I'd say he might improve again for stepping up to 3 miles. And remember, he's the champion bumper winner from last year. He's the horse who provided Willie Mullins with his 100th Cheltenham Festival winner. So he's got Cheltenham Festival form. And yeah, if he goes to the Albert Bartlett hurdle, I can see him running a big race in that.
Very interesting. We'll move to the juvenile hurdle next. Dan, I know you were quite keen on Hello Neighbour going into the race. He won again. He's now 4 from 4 under both codes put together. Doesn't seem to be a horse that does an awful lot when he gets to the front, though. He looked like he might win by a little bit further. I wouldn't know whether that's maybe stamina ebbing away, or is that just him that he's only going to do just enough.
I remember watching the race with you, and it was very much a case of put it to bed, Keith. Please don't just go now. But I can't quite figure out whether it's a case of he does hold a bit back, or that this really does almost stretch his stamina to the extremes. And I guess that would be potentially a bit of a concern at Cheltenham, because this is almost the exact same scenario as it was at Christmas, where the margin looks like it's going to be comfortable, and with each stride it gets more and more diminished. But bearing in mind, I think he did enough wrong in the early stages. He was pretty keen. I think the first 3 hurdles in particular, his jumping wasn't the best. Him and St. Lucie were seemingly having a competition who could do the most wrong in the early stages, whereas Hello Neighbour actually settled and relaxed during the race. St. Lucie went the opposite way. Clearly a very good horse, and a horse they're going to have a lot of fun with, I'd say, on both codes. I guess the issue looking at Cheltenham is in East India Dock and the Lambert. You've probably got 2 really exciting rivals, particularly East India Dock's case, who's proven how effective he is at Cheltenham, and particularly up that hill. You would look at the way Hello Neighbour's finishing out his races. Can you really see him appreciating the really long run in and the stiff uphill finish? I wouldn't be so sure, but say 4 from 4 under rules. It's hard to overly crab what he's done, but I think come Cheltenham, he's up against 2 potentially horses who may just be stronger, more confirmed stayers, and that often comes to a 4 in the Triumph Hurdle.
Yeah, it has felt like those 2 English juveniles have been maybe slightly ahead of the Irish throughout the season, Gavin. Would you still subscribe to that, or would you think that Hello Neighbour's really enhanced his Triumph claims there?
Look, Lulamba is 7 to 4. I think East India Dock is around 2 to 1, 9 to 4, and Hello Neighbour is 6 to 1 in places each way. The one thing I'd say is that spring juvenile hurdle has given you the last 4 winners of the Triumph Hurdle. One thing that's perfect for Keith in the Triumph Hurdle is the East India Dock would probably make the running. Lulamba will sit in behind, and Keith just has to stay behind Lulamba for as long as possible. Now he might end up staying there for the day, but I'm just saying he needs to track Lulamba, sit in behind Nico, and wait and wait and wait. The horse did win a maiden on the flat in Navan over 1.6 miles. When he gets now. Keith learned a lot from Christmas. He'd made too much use of the horse. He didn't jump great. He was too keen. He got there, took it up at the bend. And if you ever see, like I was in the car park of the DRF down near the last fence, and you look around, there's some climb up to the finish in Leopardstown. It's a lot steeper than people think. But he learned a lot. He was way more patient to put the hood on, and he came late. But you do expect when he jumps the last so well that he'd win by 3 or 4. He didn't. So I just think that Keith is the exact person to ride him in Cheltenham. Sit him behind Lulamba as long as you can, come late. I think 6-1 each way. I think he's got a solid chance. Galileo Dame, her jumping is getting a bit better. It wasn't good at Christmas. It was definitely better in the DRF. She could be an interesting one for the Mayor's Novice Hurdle next season if she doesn't happen to win a Grade 1 this season. But yeah, I think Hello Neighbour each way at 6-1, considering the history of the Spring Juvenile for the Triumph, I think that's more than fair, yeah.
Yeah, Donn, like I know you were a big fan of Hello Neighbour as well. Like, is it just a case, especially with the stats that Gavin's just given us there? Like, I remember the year that I think it was Farkless and Mr. Adjudicator were fighting it out, and I think everyone thought the English juveniles were ahead that year. I think it was Apple's Shakira, and it kind of ended up being potentially not quite as good a race as we thought it might be. Is there still a chance that might still happen?
Yeah, I believe that's correct, Andrew. Look, we don't know how the juveniles from Ireland compare with the juveniles from Britain. Lulamba's been high profile even before he made his debut, and East India Dock. Look, you know, they're both very good juveniles, but Hello Neighbour, yeah, like I wouldn't worry too much about his stamina. As Gavin said, he won over 1.6 miles on his first run. That was his first run ever on a race course, and he's got a flat rating of 97 after 2 runs on the flat. So he's obviously, that's a high rating, but he has the potential to improve again on that on the flat. And the third and fourth from that Navan race on the flat, they're now rated in the 90s as well. So it's solid. And he won at Roscommon on the flat over 10.5 furlongs. He won despite the drop and trip, not because of it, I thought. So I'd say, like, it did look like he might pull away from his rivals there in the Spring Juvenile Hurdle. And I kind of hoped he would and expected him to. The fact that he didn't, like, if you look back in the race, and we just had a snippet of it there, he was the only horse still in the bridle turning for home. He travelled so well through his race, as Gavin said as well. In fact, I agree a lot of what Gavin said, which is worrying.
Donn, don't be like that.
He's in the Dock. He's going to set a pace, and that's really going to suit him. Like, he wore a hood for the first time at the Dublin Racing Festival. He seemed to settle a bit better in that. Like, he did so much wrong in the Grade 2 hurdle over Christmas. The fact that Gavin Cromwell ran him in the Grade 2 hurdle and not in the maiden hurdle, to me, that was big. And then to come on here and do what he did. Galileo Dame, she ran a big race. She's rated 96 on the flat. Now she's had more runs. I think she's had 7 runs in the flat, so kind of more for the handicapper to assess her on. But you know, she ran a good race, and as you say, the beaten horses in the Spring Juvenile Hurdle, they're of as much interest going to a Triumph Hurdle statistically as the winner of the race. But no, I think Hello Neighbour could. It's only his second run of a hurdle. It's only his 4th run in his life under any code. The faster pace at Cheltenham will suit him. He'll learn from that again. He'll hopefully settle better, especially off a stronger pace. And I still think he's overpriced for the Triumph Hurdle.
The Irish Arkle was won by Majborough, but obviously we have just had news only around 10 minutes before we came on air of Sir Gino being out for the season in the Arkle, which has obviously thrown that whole market into disarray. Gavin, I suppose before we talk about the market itself, what did you think of Majborough in isolation? Because I think there's been quite a lot of people saying, you know, he maybe didn't jump as well as we thought he might do, but he still beat Touch Me Not by 10 lengths. He was still a pretty good performance.
Yeah, his jumping is excellent. At Fairyhouse, he did jump a little bit to his left. He's better going left-handed. His jumping was brilliant in Leopardstown. He made 3 mistakes, right? Fair enough. So people might crab that. The only thing I'll say is that if you watch Galopin to Champ over a fence, he makes a huge arc over it. That's fine to be a 3-mile chaser. If you're going to be a 2-mile Arkle winner or a champion chaser, you have to be quite low over your fences. If you watch Leonard Gamine, he hit many a fence in his day, but he was a great jumper. Majborough is a very, very good jumper. His time was good. It was 2 seconds quicker than your horse, Andrew, on Pan Darragh in the handicap chase, who won that off 10 stone. The time was good. I would struggle to find fault with it. It was actually funny. I was standing up in the grandstand at Leopardstown watching Majborough, and they've jumped 4 fences. He's jumped really well. And I was standing beside a friend of mine, Rob, and he had Majborough in a few multiples or something. And I said to him that I had heard that maybe Majborough didn't school brilliant during the week. And with that, he made 2 mistakes. So Rob was telling me to be quiet. But yeah, I think I couldn't find fault. I see there a few minutes ago he was 4-6. He's now 4-7 for the Arkle. Like Loda Sud won at the weekend, not very impressive. Kicked on at the bend and tied up in the finish. You've Mr. Giff, like Gippy Park perhaps might go there now. Yeah, I think Majborough would look very, very difficult to beat.
Yeah, he certainly looks it now. Like you look at that Arkle market, Donn, like I thought potentially one of the interesting ones, considering Gavin Cromwell's got a decent stack of mares, was the horse that won at Exeter yesterday only by night.
Yep.
She looks like she has plenty of speed. You know, maybe getting £7. I'm not saying she'd beat Majborough, but I'd maybe have her to beat plenty of those horses that Gavin's just read out in the market.
Yeah, she might go there now as well with Sir Gino out. It's such a shame Sir Gino was out. This was shaping up to be really one of the highlights of the festival, the match between these two, the best juvenile hurdler from Britain versus the best juvenile hurdler from Ireland last season. But look, Majborough, he's so impressive. Like, he's always looked like a chaser. Willie Mullins said when he saw him first, he was a chaser, and he's won a Triumph Hurdle in the meantime. And his jumping was good. He does go a bit to his left, which, you know, it probably wasn't an advantage at the weekend because they kind of went around the outside. The best of the ground appeared to be around the outside. It definitely wasn't an advantage at Fairyhouse. But if he does go to his left at Cheltenham, that's not a negative. It's probably a positive, especially if the ground is good to soft and no worse than that. He'll improve again. He's got Cheltenham Festival winning form. Yeah, look, it's just such a shame that we're not going to see the matchup between him and Sir Gino now in the Arkle. Yeah,
very much so. Dan, am I the only person that thinks that Only by Night has a each way chance now, or would that be something that might interest you, maybe even in or without the market?
No, I really like her. I say I was really impressed by Exeter. I've been impressed by her all season. I mean, she travels really strongly. She jumps extremely well. And no stages she really looked like she's crying out for going up to 2.5. Like, realistically, I think only the lure of the mare's chase has meant they've been looking at that. And now with obviously Sir Gino out, I'd be looking at that Arkle all day. I mean, as much as Majborough is going to be very difficult to beat, I'd say second, third is very much up for grabs there. And I'd say that triple suit are much better. Whereas in the mare's chase, you imagine they're going to have to hold on to her for as long as possible, hope the ground's on the quick side. I'd say an Arkle would be far more up her street. So no, be fully in agreement for a change with you on that one.
Our partners, BoyleSports, are fantastic with some of their offers, and best odds are guaranteed on both singles and multiples over on the BoyleSports website. Alongside best odds guaranteed, BoyleSports also offers money back if second to the SB Fab on selected meetings. Plenty of good offers over on the BoyleSports website. Irish Gold Cup, look, Galopin Des Champs, best horse around at the moment. It was fantastic to see the scenes at Leopardstown, people kind of running to the winners' enclosure, reminiscent of the Hurricane Fly days, the Honeysuckle days, maybe even back to the Denoli days. And he's just, Gavin, like, you look at this horse, he just keeps coming to the well week in, week out. And when you have probably an era of horses that maybe don't run as much as they used to, this horse just constantly runs in grade ones, constantly is right there, and he's bringing crowds to Leopardstown now.
Sure, he's an amazing racehorse. He's the best staying Irish trained chaser probably since Arkle. We've said that a few times. Going left-handed, I think, is crucial for him. He doesn't jump as well going right-handed. I know that his defeats at Punchestown have been at the start of the season, at the end of the season, but I just don't think he even jumps as well going right-handed. He should be 10 from 10 going left-handed since he went chasing, except for that mishap at the Turners. He's just an incredible racehorse. It doesn't matter if he goes slow, if they go quick. He stays forever. He jumps very well. Paul's tactics were fine. He probably had an easier race in this race than he had at Christmas. You see, when he puts in these spectacular performances, as we've seen before, that's probably not brilliant for a horse's longevity, but he had an easy enough time. But I'm going to mention a couple of horses in behind that I thought were very much, you're asking about eye catchers. I know the way you're thinking around a gorgeous race in fourth. If he runs, he's not entered in the Gold Cup, but I'd say they will supplement him. and I definitely think he'll be in the first three. And also, you have to mention the enigmatic, don't ask me to spell it, I am Maximus. He's a quirky individual. He didn't show much on his previous run, but he ran a lot better this time for Jody McGarvey, and he certainly looks all set for the international. But yeah, I loved the run of I Know the Way You're Thinking, and Galopin Des Champs was awesome as usual. In fact, the file probably logic would dictate that he might go to the Ryanair, especially that he got collared for second in the last 50 yards.
Yeah, Dan, I was going to mention that. Like, Factor is probably the one horse out of the race that we have now more questions than answers. I think everyone else maybe ran to their merits. I thought Monty Star ran a good race, considering Henry de Bromhead's stable have been a little bit lukewarm the last couple of weeks. But Factor had an awful lot go his way and didn't even come second. Surely you wouldn't look at that performance visually and think he wants another 2 furlongs.
No, and they did try what we perhaps alluded to, in that they tried to ride him a bit more patiently and come with that one run. And to be fair, there was a good few that almost looked to be looming behind Galopin Des Champs on that long run to the last, which almost made the moment more spectacular when he had seemingly these challenges come to him and he's just gone away in the style of a true champion as he is. As you say, the fact that he's been managed to get beaten by Grange Clare West on the run-in, I say, wouldn't elude you to thinking, yeah, another 2 furlongs round Cheltenham is really going to see him overturn that deficit with Galopin Des Champs. Obviously, still a relatively young horse, lightly raced. I guess the issue is, obviously, they've got Spillane Tower potentially for the Ryanair. That Ryanair is it could potentially stack up to be a really deep race this year, which is quite unusual. Obviously, Fatafar would have to have outstanding claims if he went there, given his performance, particularly earlier in the season in the John Durkin. Look, I'd like to see him go for a Gold Cup, just because at this rate, the Gold Cup's going to prove almost facile in just terms of the amount that are going to turn up. And it's almost making me hold on to my Monty Star each way slip quite happily, because I think he's almost a certainty to finish in the front three at this stage. I can't really see him beating Galopin Des Champs, but the way the race is cutting up, I can't really see him outside of the three. But Fatafar, I think we just need to now see. These last 2 runs, we've almost had more questions, as you mentioned, coming out of it. I'd say it's more likely the Ryanair at this stage, which would be a shame for the Gold Cup as a picture. But realistically, if you're talking about winning chances, he looks far more likely to have a winning chance than a Ryanair, and he does a Gold Cup at this stage of his career anyway.
Yeah, it seemed last year, looking at Factor File, he kind of almost suited more being made use of maybe at that more intermediate trip. I know he won the Brown Advisory, but it was a slowly run race. It was only 6 runners, and he was able to kind of dictate, even though he was back in 4th or 5th. Mark Walsh could kind of go whenever he wanted to. Do you feel he'd be more at home with a more forceful ride over 2-5 potentially than holding on to and maybe taking away some of his good jumping over a longer trip?
Yeah, it didn't work, obviously, against Galopin Des Champs. Look, it's hard to imagine a scenario in which Factor can beat Galopin Des Champs at this type of trip, in this kind of scenario. I know he beat him in the John Durkin chase. But yeah, Galopin Des Champs, he's never been at his best at Punchestown, I think. But he's brilliant at Leopardstown. He's brilliant at Cheltenham. And yeah, look, what he did and what he does for racing, it's just like on the clip that we saw there, they landed over the last, and as Dan said, the fact that they were all kind of congregating around him, you kind of thought it just made it all the more spectacular. But you expected him to do what he did, just to come away up the run in as he did. And it was a really good ride by Paul Townend. Like, the finishing speed percentage was 111%. So he dictated a sedate pace, and Galopin Des Champs just settled at that nice pace. And then he, given that, and it wasn't a strongly run race, it was his pace as much as anything that saw him come away up the hill. And we know that he stays 3 miles, 2.5 furlongs in a strongly run race as well. So he just has so much, and you just want him to go and win the Cheltenham Gold Cup now and join Best Mate and Arkle and Cottage Rake. I think they're the only 3 since Golden Miller to win 3 in a row. But look, as you said, lads, and you were there, the reception that he got at Leopardstown, it was just fantastic for racing to see that. I agree with Gavin. I know the way you're thinking. I thought he ran a nice race. And Monty Star, yeah, I'd say he'll come on again from this. Like he as Dan said, the Henry de Bromhead horses, they're not in great form. He's having a couple of winners now the last couple of days, so maybe they're turning a corner. And Monty Star, it's only his 2nd run this season. He probably wasn't suited by a moderate pace. I think he'll be better with a greater test of stamina. He should get that at Cheltenham. And yeah, I can see him stepping forward again from this run at Cheltenham.
2 things, Andrew.
Yep.
I want to ask Donn, was there a massive crowd when Arkle won the Gold Cup? And this, the second one is, Dan, if you backed Monty Star each way for your sake and your bet, I just hope that I know the way you're thinking doesn't get supplemented, because otherwise you can only go for one place.
Well, that's the thing. When I know the way you're thinking, where's he going to turn up? Every big target seems to be no, not there, not there, not there. So where he's going to turn up is anyone's guess, seemingly.
Yeah,
Yeah, he'll end up in one of the
I'm not sure
nationals.
Gavin Cromwell's quite as oblivious to it as he may sound in these stable tours. I think he might be holding a little bit back for himself. Anyway, we'll move on to the Sunday action, and the Grade 1 action on Sunday started with the Ladbrokes Novice Chase. I thought this was a fascinating race. It was going to give us quite a lot of answers. Ballyburn, a horse, that's been talked about plenty. I've probably been a little bit snippy about him. Just his jumping didn't really convince me, and he beat Croke Park, and it was good to see that. It was a good staying performance. Donn, coming back to you, it was exactly what you'd want to see from him, but for some reason, and I've no idea why, I've struggled to warm to him over fences this year. And even though that was an awful lot better, it's still just a nagging feeling in my brain that 3 miles around Cheltenham will be a stern test.
Yeah, it's interesting. He did a lot right here, and you see there Croke Park actually landed over the final fence in front. And I think Croke Park's an underrated horse. He's a dual Grade 1 winner. He won the Drinmore Chase over 2.5 miles for a horse who won his beginner's chase over 3, and then went on and won the 3 mile Grade 1 race at Leopardstown over Christmas. And Ballyburn, like he didn't settle perfectly well, but he settled well enough. And look, it was a whole different level or a style of competition compared to the Wayward Lad Chase, when 2 miles and Kempton and good to soft ground and Sir Gino was all just too much for him. So back up to 2 miles, 5.5 furlongs, that suited him well. I thought he saw it out well up the hill. I thought he stayed on well, and I do think Croke Park's an underrated horse. So I think maybe what he achieved in beating him and coming away from him by whatever 5 lengths in the end, that might not get the credit that it should get. So I think he's a massive player in the race. I still think Croke Park's stable companion, Better Days Ahead, is the value for the Brown Advisory Chase, and he did well. He wasn't hugely impressive in winning the 10 up chase yesterday, but I thought he did all he needed to do, and he's got Cheltenham Festival winning form as well. So and we know there's not much between Croke Park and Better Days Ahead on the running at Leopardstown over Christmas. So I thought Ballyburn did what he needed to do. I think it's hard to fault the performance that he put up here. But I thought I still think Croke Park might be an underrated horse as well.
Gavin, I suppose at the moment there's plenty of thought in the market between Ballyburn and Dancing City, 2 very different types of horses. One possibly with a little bit more class, one maybe more your archetypical stayer. Which way would you be leaning? Would you be a class man or a staying man if you were to look at the majority of the bets you'd be putting on?
It depends on the race and the category, etc. Andrew, I just wonder, what did you find wrong with his performance, Ballyburn at Leopardstown? Because his jumping wasn't good at Kempton. I thought his jumping here was excellent. Paul's body language the whole way around, even 3 out, 2 out, it's almost like Paul was getting bored, that he just knew that he had to pop the last. He ended up letting Croke Park go upside him, go ahead of him a half a length. He didn't seem overly worried anyway. And then he shook him up and he stayed on very, very strongly. This was 2.5.5. He's another 2.5 furlongs to run in the Brown Advisory. It's on the old track, which is more of a speed track. I did back Dancing City back in, I don't know, November, December time, a 10-1 before he ran in Punchestown. So I'm cheering for him, but I'd be very, very worried for Ballyburn. And like, as regards which horse Paul is going to ride, they won't even ask him. Like, he wouldn't even, he'd look at, I'd say if you asked him, are you going to ride Ballyburn or Dancing City? I'd say he'd look at you and walk away. He just wouldn't even answer you, because it's not even a debate. Better Days Ahead for me. I accept Don's point, but wasn't impressed for me in Navan. He was a handicapper last season. Yes, I've backed Dancing City. He's a grinder. It'd be better if he was on the new track. If he was in the old National Hunt Chase over 3.6, he'd be odds on. I'd just be very worried about Ballyburn. I think he has a class edge. And I definitely think he'll stay 3 miles. And I thought his jumping at Leopardstown was good.
No, his jumping was good. I think probably I just looked at the race, and I accept Don's point. Croke Park's an underrated horse, and it's about time. I think quite a lot of us cottoned on to that. But the fact that Impere Pass, who was in theory the big danger, just never rose any type of gallop. And that's not the first time he's done that at Leopardstown before either.
Yeah, fair enough. But I mean, that's not Ballyburn's fault. If other horses run bad, there's nothing he can do with that. He was, if you forget Kempton, like, he was exceptional last year at Cheltenham. I think he'll definitely stay. He's bred to stay. He has a class edge. Like, he's 2-1 there in the place. I could see him going off 5 to 4, 11 to 10 on the day, especially if Willie has had a couple of winners maybe on the Tuesday in the Arkle, etc. That's going to be odds on now, Majborough. But yeah, I think Ballyburn is going to be very, as they say down the country, he'll take a fair bit of whacking.
Tajl's Ireland Novice Hurdle next. And Dan, Kopek Des Bordes was arguably, certainly from a novice's perspective, the most impressive of the entire weekend. He didn't do everything right, but his jumping was so much better than Christmas time. And, you know, the fact that he's just pulled away from what looked on paper a decent field so easily must harvest pretty good claims for the Supreme Novices.
And we were watching it with a good friend of ours who was relying on him for a few bets. And I think the loudest cheer I had all weekend was him in my ear after he jumped the first properly and made a nice shape at it rather than ploughing through it. That was, I'm still recovering hearing in my right ear after that. But as you say, he was still a bit keen early. He still didn't do everything professionally. But the way he's gone through the race and the way he sauntered clear, the manner of a novice of serious ability, I think the time gurus and the stat gurus are always marking up as one of the premier novice performances in recent years. Obviously, Carnacay, the only one who really mounted any kind of challenge up the running to at least just stay on into second, got a mark of 144. I know a lot of people had him on handicap radars there after Martin Pipe, particularly with 144. He may struggle now to get into a Martin Pipe given the English handicapper. And I think if you're going to poke holes in it, you'd say there were a few disappointments. Obviously, Kay Doughty was fairly weak in the betting, had all the money was for Kopek Des Bordes. He was then pretty poor. Blue Devassi, who was a pretty solid benchmark. To me, I was tracking him because I backed him without the two favourites. He never looked happy at any stage of the race. Like, he was beaten from an early stage. So you have those slight caveats, but sometimes you have to ignore that when you see a horse and go through a race as well as Kopek Des Bordes did. He was in a class above these. And almost that performance has seemingly thrown the cat amongst the pigeons. From Salvatore Mundi was the supreme horse, seemingly. Now all Kopek Des Bordes and all roads lead to the supreme.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting point that they made on Road to Cheltenham a few weeks ago, just about the perceived notion of where Willie's supreme horse comes from, that it has slightly moved away from the Moscow Flyer more towards this race in the last number of years. Obviously, there's been a few from the Moscow Flyer as well. Gavin, going into the Supreme, is it a case with Kopek Des Bordes that his biggest danger is almost himself? Like, he's still, you know, a little bit, he was difficult to saddle in the pre-parade ring. He was on toes in the parade ring, and he was very keen. Can that count against him, or has he just got too much ability?
No, sure, of course it could. It could. If that happens, any horse, it's a negative. I was watching racing TV, and I was also watching RT television, and Jane Mangan was talking about him beforehand in the parade ring. And yeah, she was saying that he was sweating up and he was acting quite excited. So if you're a bookmaker and you're laying him at even money on the day in the Supreme Novices, you're praying for something like, you know, Romeo Coolio or Work Ahead or Carbo or something like this to come out and put in a brilliant performance. But to get him beat, one is he has to, you know, carry on too excited beforehand. It's going to be a big crowd, first time at Cheltenham. And the second thing is, the bookmakers will tell you that 50% of the time he has ran, he has jumped terribly. But that's stats for you. But his jumping was terrible at Christmas. He beats Cowabunga, who's a good horse, and his jumping here 11% was great. It was perfect, and it was the performance of the weekend. His time was good, the same as the bumper, slightly ahead of the champion hurdle, which fell apart. And nothing wrong with the time. And yeah, I think it was a brilliant performance. Like, you're looking at what's going to beat him. Blue Devassi didn't do the form for Romeo Coolio much good. Fair enough, that was in good ground. This was in yield to soft, but still, he looks an absolute beast. To have done that in his second start, just like Final Demand over hurdles, is quite incredible. And if they can keep a lid on him, if, you know, you'd imagine if I trained horses and I'd horse going to Cheltenham, every race I would put them last into the parade ring. I don't see what the advantage is of walking around a parade ring 4 or 5 times personally, but yeah, I think he'd be very hard to beat.
Yeah, certainly looks it. Donn, like, going into the race, we were talking about his jumping an awful lot, but I suppose in the fullness of time, the fact that he jumped as poorly as he did at Leopardstown at Christmas time and still beat Cowabunga and beat him pretty comfortably probably shows you just how much ability this horse has.
That's it, Andrew. Yeah, look, there was always a chance that if he jumped better, he'd do something like this, and he did. Like, he was 2 seconds faster than State Man, about the same time faster than McLaury in the handicap hurdle. It was 0.4 seconds slower than the bumper. So it was a massive performance. He was faster, 2 seconds faster than Carnacay through the final 4 furlongs, and Carnacay was 2 seconds faster than Good and Clever, where Great Tricks' horse finished third. So it all stacks up, and you can see he wasn't even pushed out the whole way by Paul Town, and he eased up and close home. So it was a monster performance. And on Willie's targets, yeah, the Moscow Flyer hurdle, that's always a race that the winner, if he wins that, he goes on to the Supreme. Classical Charm won this, won the Supreme Appreciated, won this and won the Supreme. Australian Forlonge and Ely Téton, they both didn't win the Supreme, but they ran in it. I did have Sir Gerhard and Ballyburn. They both went to the Bury and Bingham instead, and they won that. So it is a race that, again, Willie Mullins can go either way with his horses, but it looks like it's going to be the Supreme for Kopek Des Bordes, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, plenty in favour for Kopek Des Bordes. The Dublin Chase was after that, and Gavin, I must confess, turning into the straight, I was getting very, very excited. I was getting very excited as Marine Nationale loomed up, but I think it just seemed like he had to do his running to get there and then managed to kind of slightly flatten out. With Solness, are we in danger of completely underappreciating him, or is this probably a sign that maybe the 2 mile division in Ireland isn't quite what it's cracked up to be?
I'd say it's a bit of both. But now, Andrew, like, you had your day on Pandarrig on Saturday. You weren't going to get the big each way double.
No.
Bob
told me no.
But I think at one stage at the Bend, I'd say you definitely touched 2 or 3 to 1 on, that's for sure. What's going to be interesting, we'll come back to Solness in a second, is the pace in the race in the champion chase. Because if Ile Francais and Solness both run, it's going to be lickety split the whole way around. The one thing about Solness, we always regarded him as a handicapper. I always did. And they ran him over 2.5 miles in various trips. But since they've ran him over 2 miles and really forced the tactics and got on 10 or 15 lengths clear, he's turned inside out. It's amazing how long it can take to get to know what tactics best suit a horse. Danny was brilliant on him. A lot of people complain about the jockeys in behind. But I mean, what are you to do? If you're the one that goes after him, you probably finish in a hole and you're helping everybody else. So it's kind of, you're stuck between a rock and a hard place, I'd imagine, if you're a jockey and there's a horse gone 20 lengths in front. Gaelic Warrior ran as flat as a pancake. That's twice in a row. Fair enough, he's a lot better at Cheltenham. But like, how he's only 5-6 to 1 for the champion chase, I don't know. To me, that seems a very, very short price. Fair enough, he was brilliant in the Arkle last year, but he just looks a different horse this season. I wonder, could he step up to the Ryanair perhaps? Solness, the owners and Joseph will be praying that Ile Francais doesn't show up, because that'll mess up the tactics quite a bit if he does. John Bon is 4 to 5, most likely winner, but I don't think I've ever backed John Bon in my life, and I probably won't start now, but he deserves it. He's rated 170. He's so consistent. His 3 defeats have come at Cheltenham. I'd love to see John Bon win, but I won't back him at odds on now.
No, well, that's the big question, I suppose, with John Bon. Donn, as Gavin's saying there, like, if Ile Francais, Solness turn up, like, an Ergomene's going to be in there, usually likes to be relatively prominent as well. Like, we've just seen, like, I feel John Bon should win, but the champion chases over the last 10 years have told us to expect the unexpected.
You've got Matata as well in there. Like, he got beaten in the Game Spirit Chase at the weekend, but he'll go forward as well. It looks like he's going to run in the race too. But Solness, like, his early fractions, his second, third, fourth, and fifth furlongs were all sub 14 seconds. And they couldn't live with that. And I suppose the key part of the race was when Marine Nationale closed on him, he did look a likely winner. He traded at 1.19 in running, and he was 0.7 seconds faster than Solness in the third last furlong. But then the second last furlong, Solness was quicker than Marine Nationale. And that was the winning of the race that Danny Mullins was able to hold on to a little bit and use that in order to repel the challenge of Marine Nationale. I was with you on Marine Nationale, Andrew. I thought he would run well. He did run well. It was definitely a step forward from his last run, which was a step forward from his previous run. And there's every chance he'll take a step forward again going to Cheltenham. He's back at the scene of a Supreme Novices Hurdle win. The ground hopefully will be a bit better. I know we've had soft ground Cheltenham festivals the last 2 years, but the previous 6, I think they were all good to soft or good ground festivals. So there's every chance we'll get goodish ground or good to soft ground again this season. That will suit Marine Nationale. So I think he's a player all right in the champion chase picture, but you can't underestimate Solness. He's done it twice now. Like, when he won at Christmas time, kind of thinking JJ Slevin went around the outside on the best of the ground. Every horse didn't do that in the race. He got a solo in front. The fog might have been a factor as well. But now he's done it again. And everybody knew what he was going to do. Danny Mullins, a similar ride to the ride JJ Slevin gave him. And he's gone and beaten them again. So he absolutely has to be a player in the champion chase picture.
We'll move on to the final grade 1, which was the Irish Champion Hurdle. And Dan, we'd had such a fantastic week, pretty much all the clashes we'd wanted, all the horses we wanted to see. And the last one was State Man versus Lossiemouth. And he was cracking up to be a fantastic race halfway down the back. And then Lossiemouth came to grief. And unfortunately, we didn't probably learn a whole pile as a result.
No, as you say, we were having it all so good. We had everything kind of as we expected. We had the standout novice performances emerging. We had Galopin confirm that he is one of the greats that we've seen in recent times. This was the final piece of the puzzle, and it was just never going to fulfill after all those earlier pieces had fit so perfectly. So it was setting up to be a really good race. So we're going at each other, a strong early gallop, head to head all the way. Lossiemouth just seemed to just take her eye completely off the hurdle, went through the top of it, came to grief, and nearly brought State Man down in the process. Like, it was pretty nimble from State Man. The more you watch it back to actually avoid being brought down there, then it really would have been one of the all-time great results for the bookies if that would have happened. Thereafter, obviously, Paul's pretty much known. He's got the race sewn up. He hasn't had to do all that much. Clearly, State Man, by the end, was a tired horse, but he'd just gone a mile at a strong gallop against Lossiemouth and wasn't exactly need to be knocked around. What we don't know is what exactly form State Man remains in. Obviously, that was going to be the real litmus test for where he is and indeed where Lossiemouth fits into the picture. I never really thought State Man is as effective around Cheltenham, especially in the Champion Hurdle. He hasn't seemed at his absolute best. Like, Leopardstown has very much been his playground. So I'd still have some concerns about him going to a Champion Hurdle. Obviously, Lossiemouth seemingly quite sore afterwards in the immediate days, but they've said this is a 2-year plan to get it to the Champion Hurdle. They're not going to change now on the back of one fall, but it was a rough enough fall now, which would not exactly be ideal preparation. Hopefully we'll get some more questions answered come March, but I think Constitution Hill still holds all the aces in that division.
Yeah, Donn, unfortunately, it wasn't the result we wanted in terms of just how it all transpired. And I suppose for Willie Mullins especially, he doesn't really know almost with State Man and Lossiemouth. And at the moment, he seems to be of the idea that they both just will proceed to the Champion Hurdle and he'll let the two of them run, which would be great spectacle-wise, but you wouldn't possibly be in a mad rush to be backing either.
No, it's hard, as Dan said, going into a Cheltenham Festival on the back of a fall. Obviously, it wasn't ideal for Lossiemouth. It's such a shame. It was setting up to be a real thriller. Like, they were 7 seconds faster to the 5th flight than the handicappers were in the race a half an hour later. So they really were trapping along, and the hurdles track was riding slower than the chase track on the day. We just don't know how it would have panned out. Hopefully it was good. Lossiemouth got up and she was okay afterwards. Hopefully she's going to be okay. And yeah, she is going to go to the Champion Hurdle. William Mullins said that's what they've been planning for 2 years, so they're not going to deviate from it now. And from a situation where we were kind of wondering if Constitution Hill would be sounding well earlier in the season, ready to go and take on the Irish, now we're kind of hoping that the Irish are sounding well and ready to go and take on Constitution Hill. And then we've got brighter days ahead as well. Where's she going to go? We're going to know hopefully in 2 weeks' time. I think Gordon said where she's going to go. So if she were to take this on, and maybe the result of this race has enhanced the chances that brighter days ahead will go to the Champion Hurdle instead of going to the Mayor's Hurdle. State Man, obviously he was better here than he was the last day, but listen to Paul Tana, and he kind of seemed to think that he was getting there and just not. He never really said he was there, but he's getting there. So hopefully he'll come forward again from this. But if Constitution Hill and State Man and Lossiemouth and brighter days ahead running a Champion Hurdle, it'll be a hell of a Champion Hurdle.
Well, that is the hope. Gavin, your thoughts on the Champion Hurdle division?
I think if Con Hill, brighter days ahead, and Lossiemouth show up, State Man will be 14-1. I think I wouldn't give him any chance. Good run to Morgana, terrible run at Christmas. To me, here at halfway when she came down, how he jumped over her to stay upright was amazing. It was like me jumping over one of Donn's tackles in Fighting Side Soccer years ago. But never take on Donn in soccer. He's the nicest man in racing, but
you always jump very high, Gavin.
Yeah, I'd have to jump quite high to get over Donn's tackles. But yeah, I wouldn't fancy State Man at all. I just pray for the race. I really, really pray that brighter days ahead shows up in the Champion Hurdle. Con Hill will go off 4-9 in the Champion if she doesn't, and she'll go off 4-9 in the Mayor's Hurdle as well. So that's just going to make two. If she shows them the Champion Hurdle, you have an amazing race. I think she would go off like she's 2-1 and 3-1 and 4-1, depending if you're anti-post and so on. I think she would go off 2-1 tops if she shows up against Constitution Hill. I think she's a massive chance. But I wouldn't fancy State Man. To me, he looked a very, very tired horse to beat his co-owned Daddy Donglegs the way he did. Lossiemouth, tough after a fall. It was a hell of a fall. She's a super racehorse. I would have thought at the time, I believe she was 4-7 at the time when the incident happened. So I'd say maybe there's a chance she might have won that. But yeah, just praying really for the race that we've had Sir Gino out today. I just hope that brighter days ahead will brighten up the Tuesday by going in the champion hurdle.
Yeah, that's very much the case. You'd like to hope, especially at this time of the year, that those dreaded X's stay off Twitter and we don't have horses coming out left, right, and centre, because there's plenty of fantastic stuff, as we've just discussed, throughout those 8 Grade 1s at the Dublin Racing Festival. Hopefully, we've given you a couple of Cheltenham clues for next month as well. We'll be back in a couple of weeks' time for our full Cheltenham Festival preview, which we're very much looking forward to bringing you on the wire in association with BoyleSports. Make sure to look at all of the offers that we've shown throughout the show down in the description below, looking at the BoyleSports website. Make sure to like and subscribe down below, and subscribe to the Racing TV channel for plenty more action in the future. We'll hopefully see you in 2 weeks' time for the big Cheltenham Festival preview.
BoyleSports. Don't just bet, choose wisely.